Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Mandy Colville, and I'm here with Roseanne Polishin from the ARC of Northeast Pennsylvania. And Roseanne, I'll let you introduce the program.
Okay, great. Hi, and again, I'm Roseanne Polishin. We welcome you to our IEP mini series presentations, where we break down in a quick and concise format the different sections of the IEP and the related documents. We hope that you could follow along. You can access the annotated copies on the patent website, and if you've attended our sessions before, we had sent the annotated copy out in advance. We also will send you a copy of the slides and a recording that's available on the ARC of NEPA's advocacy YouTube channel for you to refer to in the future after these sessions. We are also available for any questions or concerns that you might have in the future after this presentation. We know it's a lot of information to digest. We will have time for question and answers at the end, or you can enter them into the chat as well. We hope you can join us for a future session as they take place on the first Thursday of the month at 12 noon. And we cover each section of the IEP and any related documents. So far, we've had the NORUP, permission to evaluate, and the present levels. Next month, we will be discussing the goals section of the IEP. So we're going to go ahead and I'll turn it over to Mandy to get started. Thank you very much.
Okay, so this section of the IEP mini-series we're going over is the Procedural Safeguards and Parental Concerns section, and we put them together since these are both of the issues in the IEP that would deal specifically with parents and parent rights, so we kind of grouped them together. Okay, so the Procedural Safeguard Notice, there's going to be a page on the IEP after your initial pages where you have the demographics and the medical assistance forms. It's going to be a small little blurb on the top of the page that will say Procedural Safeguard Notice, and underneath it, it will say, I have received a copy of the Procedural Safeguard Notice during this school year. The school has informed me whom I may contact if I need more information. The Procedural Safeguard Notice provides information about your rights, including the process for disagreeing with the IEP, and then there'll be a spot for a signature. It is okay to sign that as long as you have either been given a copy or offered a copy. I know a lot of times parents are nervous about and told not to sign things on the IEP. That's actually a myth. There are a few things it's okay to sign day of, such as your attendance form and the Procedural Safeguard Notice saying that you have indeed been offered or given a copy of the Procedural Safeguard packet. So you will be asked to sign for that at the meeting. There is a spot for you to do so right on the IEP, and that is okay. But what exactly are the procedural safeguards? So you usually get this, it's a packet, a pretty thick packet stapled together that it gets handed to you. And they describe the rights of the parent for the child with a disability and the procedures that safeguard those rights under the state and federal education laws, including Individuals with Disabilities Act, commonly known as IDEA 2004. Sometimes you hear people joke around about the procedural safeguard packet at the meeting, like, you know, how many copies you have of it, and you can wallpaper your room with it because you get them so often and they're so bulky. But actually, this is really a very important part of the IEP, an important document for you to have. And not at the meeting itself because you're dealing with other things, but I do encourage you, once you get home, make sure you take a look through that packet that you've gotten throughout the years. There's some very important and useful information to parents. As advocates, we often get questions about the process. And this packet, I almost kind of like to refer to it as a cliff note or condensed version of some of these really important, frequently asked regulations. So it gives you a little copy of it to have at home with you at all times. So that's what the little packet is that you're getting. That's what's referred to as the Procedural Safeguard Notice. So you're required to get this packet at least once a year. So if you're having an annual IEP meeting, you'll be offered it then and asked to sign for it. But there's also a few other areas where the packet is either required to be given or offered to you, such as a change in placement due to disciplinary. That's one reason. If this is your initial referral or a parent request for an evaluation, you'll get also a copy of the Procedural Safeguard Notice. At any time when you need one, you can request one and get one. You'll also be offered one or given one to you if it is your first due process or state complaint filed for the year. And what is in this notice? As I mentioned, it's a very thick pack. There's a lot of information. So when you open it up, there's going to be a table of contents that'll read to you exactly what is in the notice and where you can find it. You're going to have a section just about general information, some information about confidentiality information for your child, the state complaint procedures, the due process complaint procedures, hearings on due process complaints. You're going to have a whole section just on mediation also. There'll be information about your child's placement if it's pending mediation or due process, and what to do if your child is excluded from school because of discipline. There's also a section about what special ed services are available to your child if you are placing your child in a private school. At the very end of the packet, there's an Appendix A that has resources for parents, and Appendix B, which has sample mediation requests and due process complaint notices and forms to fill out. So as you see, there's a whole bunch of information in there that you can scroll through to find what you're looking for. Important information in there. So I'm going to go over some highlighted, really important pieces of information that you can find in there, just to give you an idea on what's in there for you to look back at and just understand that these really are some important things that you can look at to get some more information. First off, they give you the Office of Dispute Resolution consult line, and I have the phone number listed here, but it's also in that packet. This is a wonderful resource to parents to utilize. If you ever have a question about something that's happening with your child, with their IEP, with the procedure, with the placement, with appropriate education, not understanding something, any kind of dispute you're having with the school, this is a great phone number to call. And when you call, you're going to get an answering machine, and it's going to ask you to leave a message with your name, your phone number, the topic of why you're calling, and they're going to ask you for 3 days and times of the best time to reach you, and they do call back. And so keep your phone on you because they do call back. And the person on the phone will give you information regarding what you're talking about. You can have a conversation with them about it. They will also email you any extra information forms, recap of what was talked about. I feel like it's an underutilized resource a lot of the times. As advocates, I know Roseanne and I often reach out to ODR. It's great to get them as a second opinion or to get further follow-up information. So that's always a great aspect. And it is for parents. So it's not something that they are going to call the school after and let them know that Jane Smith from your district called and complained about you. It is for parents to get information and resources, so it's a great option for you to try. Also included in this packet, you're going to find information about what the obligation to prior written notice. And recently, Roseanne did her presentation on prior written notice in Pennsylvania, which we call our NORAP form, the Notice of Recommended Educational Placement. So there's going to be information in the procedural safeguards about how important the obligation for prior written notices for parents. There's also going to be a whole bunch of information about when the district is required to obtain parental consent for these different steps through the process. Information if you disagree with your evaluation that your child had. Information about the confidentiality the district must maintain for your student and their records. And then also how you as a parent are enabled to access your child's educational records. So the FERPA requests, whether you want to get documents that the school has on file, or even access future records, audio, visual, all those kind of things. So you do have access to your records, and your rights are explained to you within this packet as well. There's also a lot of information in there about disagreements and your parental rights for recourse. So there's 3 options right now that you can explore. First is a state complaint. So if you have any kind of procedural violations that you're experiencing, so we're talking about timelines. If your evaluation took over 60 days, that would be considered a procedural violation. If you requested an evaluation for your child and the district never followed through and issued a permission to evaluate, that again would be called a procedural violation. So when things aren't going as the regulations state they should, that would be a state complaint. And You have all that information about how to file it, the steps involved in it, sample forms, and everything online and submitted that way. The mediation process and due process is also explained in there. Mediation is usually an attorney-free option for parents to have a hearing officer come and sit and just try to facilitate some kind of resolution with the district as a first round of recourse. There's also the option for due process, which usually is recommended as your attorney representing you in that. So all that information about how to proceed and what to expect and the forms, that's all included in that packet that's given to you in the procedural safeguards. This also is a very important and frequently asked question that we get: disciplinary actions. Yes, students with disabilities can still be held accountable for school rules. They can still face discipline. They can even be suspended and expelled for certain reasons. That's often a myth that we hear, that, oh, my child has an IEP, so they can't get in trouble, and that's not the case. If your child is having behavioral issues and has an IEP, make sure it's documented in the IEP, in the parental concerns. If it's repeat behaviors, it would be recommended that you would ask for an FBA and a positive behavior support plan so that you can document the disability, if the disability results in behaviors, and that there's interventions in place to try to help with the behaviors or procedures to follow if a behavior occurs. And the reason that's important is because when it comes time for breaking up the school rules, there are certain parameters with the law that apply to students with disabilities. There needs to be a manifestation meeting to see if the behavior is a result of the child's disability. If a child is excluded from school for 10 consecutive days and that child has an IEP, they must have a manifestation meeting to determine whether this was an act that related to their disability or not. And that's 10 days consecutively or 15 days cumulatively. There is an exception to that if your child has an intellectual disability. After 1 day of exclusion, they are supposed to have this meeting to determine whether or not the behavior occurred as part of the disability. If the behavior did occur as part of the disability, then we need to look into whether the IEP is not being followed, whether the current interventions in place are not helping with the behavior, and whether a new behavior plan needs to be developed. But there's also some instances in which suspension and expulsion can occur, such as in the issue of any kind of drugs being involved, weapons, or serious bodily injury to the student themselves or others. So some of those are automatic suspensions and expulsions. And all of that, again, is explained in the procedural safeguard notice and what should happen, the timelines for things. All that information can be right there. Appendix A and Appendix B are really great resources for you to also look at. You will see a list of different kind of advocacy centers, law, parent-driven centers. The ARC of PA is listed there. So our chapter is the ARC of Northeast Pennsylvania. We are one of many, many chapters throughout Pennsylvania. So if you should call the ARC of PA, they can likely hook you up with who your nearest chapter is for resources. The consult line is on there, which I mentioned earlier with that phone number. You'll also see the Disability Rights of Pennsylvania contact information. HUNE is a great resource if you are a bilingual family and you need help with interpretation and a Spanish-speaking representation there. Mission Empower, Office of Dispute Resolution, the Appeal Center. The Appeal Center is another great parent advocacy-led resource to look at. The Public Law Interest of Philadelphia, the PA Bar Association. So if you're looking for recommendations for attorneys who specialize in special education litigation, that would be a resource for you to use. Hatton, another parent-led resource center that has information. Their website is also full of annotated pages of the IEP for you to refer to on things in the process you should be aware of. And the State Task Force Right to Education is listed there. That again is broken into several different chapters based on your region, and they can refer you to your local task force, which is broken up by your IU. Another great resource for you to tap into, because you connect with other people who are directly in your area, having input into things that are going on in your district, collaboratively working with them. So that's another great resource for parents to utilize at any time. And again, most of these resources, you do not need to wait until there is a problem to get involved. Being aware of who they are, because the ARC, for instance, we do advocacy, but we don't just attend IEP meetings and help when you have a problem. We offer a lot of parent training options and awareness and events and things like that. So check into some of these resources just so you can start getting plugged in and becoming more aware of what's in your area and how to be proactive rather than just solving problems. At the end of Appendix A, you'll get to Appendix B, which is going to have sample forms for the mediation and the due process. So you can see what the forms look like that you have to fill out. Again, they're also offered online if anybody needs to access them that way. Now we're going to move into the parental concerns section. So in the present level section of the IEP, there will be a spot that is labeled parental concerns for enhancing the student's education. And that is your part as a parent to have your own input, to put in there what you are feeling concerned about, what things you think are important to document. The IEP is a very big document written by the school with you as giving input as an IEP team member, but this section itself really is about you as the parent and your wishes, your concerns, your suggestions, your thoughts, your feelings on how things are going or what areas need to be improved on. So usually this information comes about from a discussion that is had at the IEP meeting, and a staff member will be taking notes based on the discussion you're having about what things you seem concerned about, and they will insert a little blurb into your IEP about it. Sometimes also you're given a questionnaire by your case manager prior to an IEP meeting, asking you some things like identifying your students' strengths, things they've made progress with, any concerns you're having. And sometimes the information from that questionnaire gets developed and becomes the input into that section. This next option, which happens to be my favorite option and the one that I think most advocates would usually recommend, is that you as the parent write your own parental concern statement. As great as it is that you're part of the discussion and the team and somebody's taking notes on it, only you know how you're feeling, what your thoughts are, what your priorities are, and you don't want to leave it up to somebody else to paraphrase and maybe get some information wrong or not really highlight the things you felt most passionately about. So, of course, you need to bring forward your concerns at the meeting, discuss them, and then let them know at the meeting, I will be emailing you a copy of my parental concern statement that you can just cut and paste and add verbatim into the IEP. It is your right to do that. At times, we've been told some districts say there's only a certain amount of space and it can't be too long, or sometimes you submit something and then they still cut it down and paraphrase it. You can just remind them that this is your concern statement. Please insert what I have asked verbatim to document what you actually feel you are concerned about as a parent. So it's very important. And that section can be at any time, it can be updated. Anytime you have an IEP revision, something gets changed with the IEP, I would suggest that you do add on another section to it just to document what your take on the meeting was and what you're seeing going forward. So those are, in general, what the parental components of the IEP are, starting with your rights, your procedural safeguards, and your spot to document the concerns accordingly in there. You know, we went through this a little bit. It's a short section of the IEP, and as Roseanne mentioned, we are going through all different parts of it, and every month we'll have a new section. But if anyone has any questions specific to the things we talked about today, feel free to either unmute and ask a question or enter it in the chat. Also, I'll leave this up to, this is our contact information. The three of us are advocates for, I see Katie's here also. Hi, Katie. We are the advocates for the ARC of Northeast Pennsylvania, and here is our contact information. So at any time, if you have a question that is more personal and you don't feel like sharing publicly, you could certainly reach out to any of the three of us. We are here to offer any assistance and guidance we have. So I'll see if there's anyone with questions at this point.
Maybe we could go ahead and stop the recording, just in case anybody wanted to discuss something. We don't want to have it on,
Yes.
recorded if they weren't comfortable. I just wanted to also add too, when you're talking about the parental concerns, sometimes we